Viewers may remember Michael Bain from the Best Defense or Shooting Gallery, television programming to which he brought a wide range of experience. It ranged from journalism, basically, I believe, magazine features, to extreme sports like cave diving, mountain climbing, competitive shooting, and probably other adventures he hasn't told us about. These days, I absorb a lot of Michael's programming on video and podcasts, and for me, much of the value is in the perspective, Michael, that you bring to your commentary on current events. That really speaks to me. Thank you for agreeing to answer some of my questions this morning.
Always happy to be here, and it's good to see you. It's been a while.
It has. I remember being part of some of the NSSF's journalism outreach that you were heading and graciously asked me to participate in from time to time. That was some of the fun things that we did together.
And that was, interestingly enough, I mean, those NSSF media programs were enormously successful. I mean, NSSF still uses some of the contacts that were generated out of those media programs. And they were successful because we're the media. We actually know how this stuff works.
Well, you are.
Well,
but going back to those journalism days, and that's a great jump point. How does today's civil unrest differ from the protests that turned violent while you were a young journalist?
There are a lot of similarities as well as differences, but I think that I have found over the years civil unrest, riots, to be absolutely fascinating creatures. You know, as a journalist, it's something that you find fascinating to be involved in. And ironically, some years back, I was spending some time with some guys from the SAS. And out of the clear blue, one of them said, "Have you ever been in a major riot?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I've been in a bunch of them." And he goes, "Oh, we ended up spending like a whole afternoon talking about what we had learned from riots, from civil unrest." They'd been in civil unrest riots in Northern Ireland, in various places in other parts of the colonies, as it were. But I think that if I could put just one thing on modern civil unrest, is that it is damn well organized, and that makes it scary, because when you see how it works, when you see these pieces that come together, and then you have an organizing engine, maybe for lack of a better word, an organizing engine like social media, then you're able to control the demonstration, the protest, the unrest, the riot at a level that wasn't done, back in the 60s, early 70s, during those periods of riot. Those tended to be a little more anarchic because there was there was much less command and control. Social media gives the ability to have a higher level of command and control, if that makes sense.
Well, that is a little terrifying, and yeah, I see what you're talking about, the spontaneity. Another thing that we think of when we think of the word spontaneous, and you may school us and say, that ain't so, is the thing that's called a flash mob. And you spoke to that on your podcast, and what I'm kind of wondering about that is it spontaneous? Is it resource predation? Is it tribal violence? Let's sack and burn the opposing tribe. Let's obliterate them completely. Or what else is it? How does that fit in?
I think it's all of the things that you just said. In a sense, it's a new animal under the sun, because it is a coordinated attack through social media. And I think that when they started out, the concept of flash mobs started out, and we address this a lot on the Best Defense. The primary driving factor, and you're going to think this is really stupid, the primary driving factor was fun. What do you want to do on Saturday night? Let's go it's fun. Again, having been in, major riots in Washington, D.C., including the uber-violent Last Weatherman above-ground action assault on the South Vietnamese embassy, having been in the Overtown riots in Miami, having been in riots in L.A. and in my home in Memphis. I graduated from college when Dr. King was killed, and one of the things that that I did is friends of mine and I, we broke curfew and went into the riot zone, and we're there in one of the most hellish urban riots in the United States. But one thing that's been consistent, which I saw in the Washington riots, saw in the Overton riots, is they're fun. They're fun, and for us, for normal people, we go like, well, that's sick. Destroying other people's property, shoving people to the ground, beating people up. Oh, that's sick. Talk to any 3-year-old. You want to find out if violence is fun? Ask a 3-year-old. When they're tearing up every toy they have. And so initially, the flash mobs, to me, were driven by that. They were tribal in a very strong essence. We are... as you know, we are in the process of retribalizing the United States. It is a very bad thing. It always ends up badly. It always ends up in the same place. But nonetheless, these are the tracks we're on now. So you have a tribal ritual, if you will. We're all in this same thing together. We do this flash mob competing, and that works out really well. But here's the thing: like, gangs are smart. The major gangs in this country are not being run by morons. They are multi-billion-dollar, multinational industries, and they're very good at what they do. And I think it didn't take very long for the larger gangs to say, wait a minute. These guys are having a big old time. Let's have a big old time in a jewelry store, and let's give them a sledgehammer. Because, darn it, it's fun to break stuff. Then you're in, then you're out. There's no one person that has a responsibility, especially with the one of the issues that I've been on for 2 or 3 years is that there's so many changes in the landscape of what we think of as self-defense that one of them is the police are... The defunding of the police, the demoralization of the police, the absence of qualified immunity, where officers are obligated to pay the first $10,000 of any kind of suit against them. Well, they ain't coming, and I don't blame them. I mean, I have, as you, we both have many, many, many friends who are law enforcement officers. Most of the ones I know are either retired or counting seconds until they can get out. And I understand that. But so it creates a situation where a flash mob can evolve into essentially a very sophisticated armed robbery model, which, it's working great all around the country. It's really working super. You see retailers shutting down or putting everything behind glass, everything behind plastic, because there is no defense. The defense is if those the people involved in a flash mob type robbery, when they come running out, if the entire police department is there with sticks and beat them into the ground, possibly it might not be nearly as much fun. In one of the Washington riots, I was beaten to the ground by a cop on horseback with a long stick, and I can assure you it isn't fun.
Well, that's one of the differences. Is there used to be the riot line, the shields, right, the nightsticks, and now, if I'm reading my news correctly, the gang goes into the Macy's and runs out with what they wanted. Now you mentioned that organizational structure hidden behind it all. Now we've definitely got resource predation, but with some other things going on, and that joy of violence being one of them.
The joy of violence being one of them. The fact that they can make money from it. First it's fun, and then, and we've all done this. We've done something we say, it's really a lot of fun, and then we discover I could make a couple of bucks off this. And it's like, okay, if I'm dealing with MS-13 or I'm dealing with, Latin Kings, pick a gang, any gang, and they go, hey, when you run out of that store, if you could grab like a handful of electronics, of small games, electronics, we'll buy them to you. We'll buy them from you for X. And, you can take that money and do whatever you want with it. So it becomes an organized crime function. And the gangs themselves, which are, essentially the primary modern crime organizations are these big gangs that came out of drugs. that came out of the first the opioid epidemic, which we all talk about, and of course, which the government cracked down on doctors and prescriptions, which had nothing to do with it, of course. As usual, the government cracks down and makes it hard on. It's a touchy subject with me because I had a friend who was in the process of dying of cancer, and she really good friend. And at the end of her life, she had to have somebody drive her to the doctor's office to get her weekly 7-day prescription of an opiate drugs. She had like a month to live. I'm pretty sure she wasn't a drug dealer. So it cracked down on her, but it didn't crack down on the gangs doing it. The other thing that I really wanted to mention here is and this was a little bit true back when I was in riots, but what we see now in civil unrest is we see government-sanctioned violence. And we see it, I believe, at a level we have never seen it in the United States before. I've seen it in Central America. I've seen it in South America, where always a story I would like to tell is I was in a South American country, and it was pouring down rain, tropical rainstorm, and a military unit was walking down the sidewalk, and a friend of mine said, "Step off the sidewalk." I said, "I don't want to, man. It's running like a river in there. If I step off the sidewalk, I'm going to be soaked." And he goes, "Step off the sidewalk or die. You got one of two choices. The military guys will shove you down and kill you." I said, "But," and he goes, "But what?" Welcome to our world. The sanction delivered by the military, which was involved in smuggling drugs, was beyond the civilian authorities, or was sanctioned by the civilian authorities. But here we see with the rise of Antifa, which are essentially shock troops. They're good at what they do. The one thing that I saw, and I've talked about it a lot over the last few years, and I've been able to talk about it with really great trainers like John Murphy and stuff, Ed Monk, especially John Murphy, talking about, when you watch the first Antifa riots are very anarchistic, very much like you might see in 1969, 1970. But then you started watching. I was watching with a friend of mine, my girlfriend, you would know, Gila. And I said, "Oh my God, watch that." I said, "Look at the guy way over on the right-hand corner of the screen." She looked and he goes, "The guy just standing there and with the headset on?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's command and control." I mean, this is an organized riot. This is an organized move. This is moving troops around the battlefield. It's a prepared battlefield. So you've got a battle space, and you are moving your troops around on that battle space. That is a little more sophisticated than we saw in the early days. I spent time with Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman, who were famous figures back then. I got to spend some time with them. I have a very checkered past life, but they were looking for that. That's what they wanted, is they wanted command and control. Yes. They wanted more control of like a big demonstration, because a big demonstration, a march on Washington, fill in the blank, was going to turn into a riot. They knew it. Everybody knew it. It was going to turn into a riot. But the problem was it was more of a question of just lighting the fuse. The bomb's going to go off, but you don't have as much control. Those guys on the front who are going to tip it off, who are going to light it up, they're you need control of those guys, or at least you need communications with them. You need communications to be able to bring in medevacs out. You need communications to move troops from one area to the other.
Yes.
And we have all that now, and it works. Unfortunately for us, it does work. One thing that Ed Monk has talked a lot about, and is that in this environment, if you're the one who has to defend yourself against a politically sanctioned violent actor, then the politically sanctioned violent actor isn't going to jail. You are.
Right.
Yeah. It's a terrifying thing.
It is, and I think that it weights our decisions. I mean, it's almost like we've got multiple concerns. One is recognizing and avoiding it which you were actually literally looking for it and going to it, but most of us sane people, Michael, would actually say that's forming up down the street. Gee, I'm going to go the opposite direction. But also if we're caught in it, and so I'm thinking about strategies, I'm thinking about tactics, and thinking back to the podcast I heard you speaking on, and something you said this morning. No one's coming. We have to save ourselves. So I think we factor that in. If saving ourselves means using force against other people, what you just said. We may be the person arrested, not the person that we had to use it against. And if we ever question that, Rittenhouse is a good example. If vile actors don't know they'll be prosecuted, I think that makes them a whole lot more willing to come at us. And then that really worrisome statement that you made, we need to be 100% right 100% of the time. My God, I can't sleep after you said that, Michael. But seriously, I think that we start looking at how we live and say, okay, we acknowledge that this is happening. Michael's not just having a fantasy. This is in front of us. This is in our newsfeed. We watched Kenosha footage in depth. We saw it happening on the TV in front of us. What do we do if we're caught there? How do we get out of there with the minimum damage to ourselves and our loved ones?
First, there's a level of awareness, and one thing I remember this because it was such a bizarre incident. It was in Washington D.C. and it was in the middle of some riot, and police are running and sirens are going off, and there's tear gas everywhere. People are screaming, and a woman is walking across one of the bridges into D.C. and she's got a briefcase, and she's got a suit on, and she looks at me, and I'm standing there. I got a gas mask dangling on, all this kind of stuff, and she looks at me and she says, "Is something going on?" Yeah. You just walked into the soup, sweetie. Number one is we need to have a level of awareness that begins by understanding what's going on in our community. We have to be aware of the news of what's going on. Is there going to be a demonstration? Because I'm here to tell you, if there is a demonstration, it is likely going to become a riot. If it doesn't going to become a riot, it's really a surprise. But you have to understand that it's very likely going to become a riot because the people behind it want it to be that. They're looking for news coverage, and a bunch of guys walking around with a sign that says peace, love, and happiness doesn't get it. So first, you have to say, well, it's almost like the weather. We all look at weather.com or we look at the Weather Channel and we go like, well, there's going to be a hurricane tomorrow, so I think I'm going to sleep in. And it almost has to be exactly the same with that. It's like, the local newspaper says there's going to be a huge riot at this, or there's going to be a big demonstration at the State House. My office building is next door to the State House. I'm going to call in sick. Number one, I'm not going to be there. The second point is once you realize you're there, you need to get out while you can, because you need to think of a demonstration or a riot. As it intensifies, it tends, especially with a lot of people, that tend to be pushed together. So if you find yourself, things are going on, you're like, what the heck is going on? Your immediate thought should be to get to the outskirts, get to the sides, because the sides you have a chance. If you're in the middle, you're going to be pushed toward the middle. And I had people say to me, they said, well, you just push your way back out. Yeah, give that a try. Yeah. If you're surrounded by a couple of thousand people and they're going east, you're going east. You're not going to, because sooner or later, if you try to push your way out, you now become the other. You become the enemy because you're trying to get out. Yeah. I mean, I remember being in one situation where somebody said, Are you with us? I said, absolutely. Smash the state. What do you want me to say? I'll say anything you want me to say to not end up beaten there or trampled. And trampling is the big fear. So I learned I want to get to the outsides. I want to get against buildings because buildings have doors. And if you got any brains and you have a restaurant and there's a riot, you lock it. But sometimes if you, and I hate to say I've actually done this, if you grovel, they'll let you in. Because I have big passes that say media. I got it at the Weatherman Above Ground Action. People were throwing Molotov. I was hiding under a truck with a gas mask, and the car next to me blew up. And I thought, really, being under the truck is not working for me. I need to go find somewhere that's not going to blow up. But you need to work to the sides as quickly as you can. You need to then be able to use that environment in the sides. There might be an alleyway. There might be an entrance to a doorway. Anything you can do to get into the entrance of the doorway. Even if it's just a niche, you can push yourself in the niche. And what you're waiting for is the larger flow of the riot to move past you. You want the big crowds to move on past you. I've been in a niche, just between buildings, and somebody said, "What's the matter? Are you afraid?" I'm like, no, just catching my breath, brother. I'm just catching my breath. I'm waiting for you to go by so I can get out of here.
Yeah. Actually, I'm terrified, but so is this applicable to the smaller, perhaps more volatile flash mob situation?
Absolutely. And more
Get
than
to the outside.
those scare me more than anything else.
Yes.
Because they're in a larger demonstration. Once again, you have command and control. You may think it's not there, but it's there. And they're not necessarily wanting to give you, what would Greg Ellifert say, or Evan Marshall, an instructional beatdown. They not necessarily want to do that. They're there to get media. But when you look at a situation like a flash mob or any of these smash and grab robberies that are happening all over the country that are outgrowth of flash mobs, the level of violence there is super high. There is a less level of control. Most of the control is go, stop, run. And if you're in there, let's say you're in the Jewelers or heaven forbid, you're in the Walgreens, and you're in the over-the-counter drug section, and all of a sudden people become flooding in. They're flooding around you. They're stuffing bags. Your move is to get out, and you can never get out through the middle. Ideally, and I know that you guys have taught this at the Firearms Academy of Seattle, forever, is that when you walk into a room, you need to know where the out is. You need to know where the door is. Is there an exit? Is there a way out the back? Is there a big sign that says no admittance? That's great, good, because that's going to lead to a back door.
That's where I'm going.
Yeah, I want to go through the no admittance. But something the late Dr. April, William April, my dear friend and a loss to the community, one of the things that William talked about was in his studies of these kind of events, probably an amazing, he like 75% plus followed the signs. If the sign said no admittance, they didn't go in. So we actually set up scenarios in the best defense where we had the only escape was through signs that said employees only, no admittance, alarm will sound. You don't care if the alarm sounds. You want the alarm to sound, But more than anything else, it becomes necessary for you to know where your outs are, to walk into a room and say, okay, exit on the right, exit on the left. The second thing is you need to be aware of what's happening outside of the venue you're at. If you're in like a jewelry store, you're one of those Rodeo Drive places that are now closed because, for their sacked. They have glass windows. And if you look out that window and you see a lot of people coming from different directions, they're homing in on you, leave. You can always come back. The only thing that will happen if you leave is you might not buy that $3,000 jacket. But you need to say, I guess it sounds stupid, but you need to err on the side of caution. Is I see a bunch of people angling, moving in this direction. I don't need to be here. I need to be out. I need to be gone. Especially if I have family with me, if I have people under my care, children, spousal units, they have to understand that when I say it's time to go, it's time to go. That maybe it's a code word, maybe it's, I've had this talk with my sweetie. We've been together for 30 years, but I had this talk early on. So there are things that may happen in our life that I'm going to say, we have to do X right now. I will never embarrass you. I will never do something stupid. I will never trick you. If I say that, it's only because I am aware of a situation that's potentially developing around us that I want us out of. And we have to, that's a hard talk to have. You have to be able to move, and you need to be able to move very quickly, and you need to be able to move without thought of, boy, I'm going to be embarrassed with this in the morning. That's cool. You get to be embarrassed and alive.
Well, exactly. And so you're talking about preparatory steps, which is absolutely great. And I hadn't even thought about the couple side of things. Some of those things almost become reflexive, like you and your sweetie after all these years. But you're right. If you haven't worked it out, you do need to work it out. But then also inside of our own heads, what do we give ourselves permission to do? And one of the things that you talked about in a recent podcast was mental rehearsals. Now, this gets interesting because we're mentally rehearsing scenarios for things that some people have called unimaginable.
Absolutely right.
How bizarre is that? We're trying to imagine the unimaginable, but I'm also concerned about our internal biases. We think we know more than we actually know. How do we build these realistic mental rehearsals so that hopefully there is a card to turn over in the chaotic situation that says, leave stage right, I'm doing it.
And part of it is exactly that, what you just said. It's simple. Simplicity is an important part of this. I mean, once again, William April said, we all have to make spaces in our heads for things that can happen, because unless we make a space in our head for it, we can't plan. We can't model. We can't do the modeling that's necessary. One of the things I learned in high risk sports, and again, like cave diving and mountain climbing and jumping off things, and really a plethora of stupid. And now that I'm older, in the morning I get up and I have to jump start parts of my body. 10 years in the dojo didn't work out as well as I hoped. But one of the things you learn in extreme sports is that 100% right 100% of the time. That's a phrase that I stole from my primary cave diving instructor, John Olorski, who is a certifier of certifiers in cave diving. And he goes, you have to understand what keeps you alive. And then you have to practice that 100, it has to be 100% right 100% of the time. And he goes, in order to do that, you can't have 50 rules. You can't, in a sense, that's one of the geniuses of Colonel Cooper and the safety rules. There's 4. Dogs can remember them. I once had a company offer to pay me a large sum of money to rewrite the safety rules, to create 10 rules. And I turned the money down because I said, I don't think I can do a better job than Colonel Cooper. I mean, it works. It's simple. It's straightforward. In cave diving, it's like, oh, well, how many rules are there? There's like 3. You always have a line back to the surface, redundant everything, always have multiple lights, and dive thirds, 1/3 in, 1/3 out, 1/3 when everything goes south, which it will sooner or later. And so when we talk about these kind of situations, we can't have a complex scenario. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tuck and roll, and then I'm going to withdraw my AR-15 from the backpack. At the same time, I'm drawing my Randall attack knife, which I'm going to keep in my teeth. None of that stuff is going to work. What's going to work is out. I need to get out. Oh, when I stepped into the room, I saw there was an exit on the left, exit on the right. Exit on the right's closer. Bye. Out the door. I'm going to go, or like I said, any sign that says keep out employees only, perfect. I want to go there. I want to make every move that I make simple. Have you ever seen the video that came out of the Kenya mall terrorist attacks in Kenya, like years back?
Yeah, a while back, long time.
And if you look at that, if you study it though, and again, William and I talked about studying this video, is the people who survived did simple things. I'm behind cover. Okay. Whether it's cover or concealment, all cover and concealment comes with a clock attached to it. The minute you go behind there, the clock starts. Tick, hit the timer. You have X amount of time to move to more cover. Because in a fluid situation, a chaotic situation, and one of the points that I just have hammered, and I believe this, like many people in my family believe in Elvis, is that all violence is a chaotic system, a chaos system. And a chaos system being defined as there are so many factors acting on the system that you cannot predict. It's non-predictive. You don't know what the factors are, and you don't know how they're acting on the system. And they are changing as the timeline runs across. So you say, well, and we've all been in martial arts, right? So there's always that time when, especially years ago, you're in the dojo and you're after dojo and you're sitting there and a guy goes, now if a guy comes into the bar and starts insulting you, are you going to like do a round kick? Are you going to do a knee, snap kick? You going to punch you in the face? I'm like, I'm going to leave. They're like, well, why would you leave? So I want to get in a fight.
Yeah.
That's odd. I'm not looking to get, because it's conceivable. Once again, in this chaos system, it's conceivable that that's Chuck Norris. Bizarrely, in one of my other lives, I have sparred with Chuck Norris and also Jorge Gracie. It's like being struck by lightning. You know, you think you're good right up until the point you're lying on the ground going, wow, that hurts a lot.
And
so
it
you
happened
don't know
really
that.
fast.
It did. Very fast. I once, when I was probably at my peak as a martial artist, and I loved fighting, and I went to a different gym, and they had a Golden Gloves champion there, Navy Golden Gloves champion. He goes, you karate man? I said, yeah. Look at me. Whoa, I had a black belt. Woohoo! You know, and he goes, you want to fight? Want to spar? I said, sure. And, I stepped into the ring, and I was there at least 30 seconds before I was lying on my back and someone was standing over me going, how many fingers? How many fingers? They really do that. They go, how many fingers? How many fingers? You go like 80, 90, 72, 3. I never saw the punch that took me down. And I spent the next month working with the guy to learn how he threw that punch. Because if I never saw it coming, I thought it might be a handy thing. But
back to your bar scenario, you have spelled out why you didn't do it, because the unimaginable, it being someone with a high level of skill, could have happened. You acknowledge that possibility.
Absolutely. And I mean, I knew that from growing up. I grew up in the South. I grew up in Memphis. A lot of my relatives were, let's say, casual about their relationship with the law. That it was different times, and they might on one side stand with the sheriff, the local marshal, about when he needs help, but on the other hand, they might also run whiskey, which was the family business. And my grandfather and my uncles who did run whiskey told me, they said, the problem is you don't know who the other guy is. And he has a say. I mean, that's a cliche we all use now. The other guy has a say. Well, he also might have a knife. He also might have a shotgun. He also might have 10 friends. You don't know. You can't know. So everything that you do has to be predicated on a worst case scenario. Not only does he have 10 friends, but he has an RPG and a grenade. But and this is just a small Michael thing, and I'm sure you'll allow me to say it. One of the things that bothers me a little bit about the training community right now is that there's a lot of training that pushes in directions that scare me. I understand that you may need hand-to-hand skills and gun and all that. But the problem is that bar that we were talking about. The problem is after an evening of fighting or an afternoon of fighting, and you're with all your buddies in that bar, and all those guys have a solution to the person that comes up to them and says, oh, your mother wears combat boots, or, boy, your girlfriend was great. Your boyfriend was great. I mean, and that is to fight, because that's what we've been training to do. We have been training to fight. We have been training with this pistol. What's that great line? When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Or, what did Masada Oob say? It's like, when you have one of those batons, everything looks like a kneecap. It's in your head. You program those responses. Yeah. And you say, okay, I know just a little bit of BJJ. I studied ground fighting. I studied grappling. And all of a sudden I'm in a situation, I go, I know what to do. I got this. And all of a sudden you see 5 guys walk in the bar. And boy, oh boy, you're getting ready to have a really bad day. You have to be careful that your training doesn't program you to do something that puts you in the soup.
Yeah.
I mean, William and I spent a lot of time on this. Is that the danger of it's like, we talked about, okay, we're all in competition. I shot USPSA, I shot IDPA, fill in the blank. I shot all of them. And it's like, okay, we're going to program you to do what? Bang, bang.
Yeah.
Did they fall down? Well, I don't know, see, because I've already run to the next bank of targets.
Yeah, the wrong solution. But we're coming out of our biases. We're coming out of this erroneous information that we think we know. And that's the really scary thing, whether it's range training, whether it's mental rehearsal. It's just so hard to know what we should prepare for, short of the vigorous escape.
Well, vigorous escape, and then it scales. To me, it scales up from there. You have to work the tree, decision tree. A lot of my early thinking was shaped by Andrew Branca, oddly enough, in his very first book, which was, he must have had 10 copies printed, and somehow one.
It was a little red covered piece.
The little red
had
covered book.
Precious thing. I still have mine.
And I think I do too. And Andrew said, He goes, all the talk you did about my book made me go back and reprint it. But I understood the decision tree and how that decision tree worked. And at each stage in the decision tree, and we model this a lot on The Best Defense, was understanding, I made a decision here. I'm George Zimmerman. I made a decision down here that led me to a branch I didn't want to be at. In fact, with Marty, your spousal unit with that at Firearms Academy of Seattle, Marty and I walked through the entire Zimmerman event and go like, okay, at this point, what could he have done? What other decision would have yielded the results he wanted to have the police find some sketchy guy without having him on his back having to shoot some dude, And so with my decision tree always has exit as an opportunity. But interestingly enough, Hewlett-Packard, how about that for a segue? Hewlett-Packard, in their new product design model years ago, they created something called phases and gates. And that means that you work on this part of the project is the phase. You work on phase 1, and then there's a gate. And that gate is the gate to phase 2. But the way it works is that once you step in the gate automatically shuts. You cannot start thinking about phase 1 and phase 2. You can't do it. They wouldn't let you. They wanted you to think through everything in phase 1. When you step through the gate closes behind you. And that's a model that I used working with John Shaw, who wrote the very first book on practical shooting, which I co-wrote with him. You can't miss. But, we talked about how phases and gates work. You get to a certain point and you step through the gate. And I applied it to self-defense. In self-defense situations is, okay, it's a hard gate. When I step through that gate, I am no longer rethinking what caused me to step through the gate, because that slows me down. I've gone from strategic to tactical, say. I've stepped through that gate. I've tried escape. I've tried evasion. I've tried this. I said, but now I have to step through that gate, and I'm going to have some kind of response. But what I don't want to think about is, oh, man, should I have turned left back there? Should I should I have screamed and cried like a baby? I mean, no. Once you step through that gate, you have to wipe all that other stuff out, and you only work the problem in front of you. Okay, is this and question, is it a shooting situation? And if it's a shooting situation, what have I done? I've now stepped through another gate. When I step through that gate, if I say, okay, I'm in phase 2, I can't find an out. This guy is moving toward me. This person, the aggressor, is moving toward me. He clearly has his hand in his pocket on something. I've now moved into a different situation. And as I step through that gate, my sole concern is dealing with the tactical situation. What am I going to do? Am I going to go to the gun? Where am I going to go to the gun? Am I going to shoot the guy walking toward me? What are the, I know I'm going to yell stuff. I know I'm going to say things. There's a whole series of things that we train to do, and they do work. John Shaw said, he had the great analogy of saying, okay, everybody thinks we have unlimited attention spans, right? We have unlimited attention. We can do anything. We can multitask. We can knit at the same time we're shooting. It's incredible. But we can't. What we have is $1 of concentration, 100 pennies. And your only choice is where you put the pennies. And in the course of a day, you'll find yourself saying, I got 5 pennies here. I got 5 pennies on my desk wondering why the hell that microphone didn't recharge. I got 3 pennies wondering how much coffee is left. But as you move through these gates into more and more dangerous situations, all your attention needs to move in that direction. Shoot, no shoot is 100 pennies, period. Because it has to be, because it's the rest of your life. It's the rest of your livelihood. It's your family. All of that hangs on your ability to concentrate 100 pennies. Shaw used to tell the SAS guys, he goes, I need you to put 100 pennies on the front side of that MP5. Because that's the most important thing in your universe right then.
Yeah.
And we if we're in the Walgreens when it gets sacked, 100 pennies has to be on, what do I do? Well, best case, escape. Escape is always the best case. Best case is someone else gets mugged. Second best case, can I talk my way out of it? Here's another thing that worries me about training. I read a thing about, recently about verbal de-escalation. I've taught verbal de-escalation. I know you have too. Well, in the world we're in right now, does verbal escalation work? And, my question is, if you went to Mexico City and you were mugged in Mexico City, would verbal de-escalation work? Your tactics of verbal de-escalation work? And I think they wouldn't. I've been in Mexico City, and it wouldn't work because it's not your culture. You now have a different culture you're dealing with. So the words now have different connotations. And we are now dealing with a different culture.
Yes.
The words have different connotations. I can tell you this, if you try to talk down, if you try to de-escalate a multiple aggressor situation, well, what's going to happen? You're going to be trying to de-escalate with Joe Bob, who appears to be the warlord, and there's going to be people on the side of Joe Bob trying to ramp up, trying to escalate, trying to do. If you've been around gang situations and you manage to walk away from it, you realize how fluid and scary they are. Because a lot, there are people there, it's like, hit him, shoot him, hit him. And you're going like, well, let's try to de-escalate this. It's important to understand the limitations of things that we have taught.
Yes.
In a new world, in a world that, if you remember the old cartoon Howard the Duck, it's a world he never made, but Howard the Duck was stuck in it. And like Howard the Duck, we're pretty much stuck here. And so we have to factor those kind of training things in. It's okay. I can maybe I've verbally de-escalated against an aggressor and made it work. I made him laugh. And as soon as he laughed, I got to leave. We were both sitting there with our hands in our jackets. So we all knew where we were. We knew what comes after. None of it, neither he nor I had any illusions about what comes after. But, on that particular day, at that particular time, he didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
And I never want to go there unless it's my life, someone important to me's life. I never want to go there. I'd rather go my whole life.
This is one place where Michael cracking wise actually paid off for Michael.
I did. You'd be surprised at what you can get away with. I looked the guy right in the eye, and I held up a can of dog biscuits, and I said, I'd like to talk to you, man. It was outside a convenience store in Tampa, Florida. So I'd love to talk to you, man, but my dog's a junkie, and if I don't get these dog biscuits home, he's going to freak. And the guy looked at me for a minute, and he goes, your dog is a junkie for dog biscuits? Yeah. Yeah, and he goes, oh, man, that's so cool. And so, essentially I had altered a situation, which I'd always rather do.
Yeah.
And one thing I've talked about, and this is, has been used by a lot of other trainers that they have a similar situation. Hakim, I believe, is it the power of apology in bad situations. I've looked at really bad situations and looked a guy in the eye and said, I'm an asshole. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just sorry. And the next thing I know, his gang, which terrified me, just terrorized, a New York City gang, asked me in to buy a drink. They said, can we buy you a beer? I'm like, no, I better go ahead and get on home. No, you get done, there's sweat pouring down your back. It's like, oh, God, I can't believe that worked.
Yeah, straight out of verbal judo and slip phrases. Off you went.
Yeah, off you went. If you can do that, do it. But at the same time, be aware that when you have a situation like a flash mob, a flash robbery, those guys, and I say guys in the loosest possible sense, because we have 4 women in lime green, jumpsuits beating the crap out of people on a train. It's one of the great ways we've achieved equality is there's as many women aggressors as there are men aggressors, but they are targeted at that point. Once they're flooding in, they're going to complete their action. You are not going to be able to turn them from that action. So those ideas of verbal de-escalation are closed to you in that situation. At least I believe they're closed to you in that situation. And every minute you spend trying to do that is it's time wasted. It's gone. You haven't used that time to its best use, which is, oh, crap, I got to get out. Or, oh, crap, I got to be invisible. I got to make sure that I don't somehow stumble into the guy with the sledgehammer,
Yes.
opening up those things, because sledgehammer would open me up too.
Well, physical engagement against multiples is a whole science, and Mark MacYoung did some pretty good work with that. And if we're not familiar with it, we should be terrified by what he taught us, because there's not too many wins in it for me.
There aren't. People should read Mark MacYoung's stuff on that. It's basic reading for what it is we do, but there are now one of the changes in our landscape, in the self-defense landscape that we see now, are the rise of multiple aggressors. Now, I remember the very first time I took Masada Ayoub's LFI-1. I was 11. I don't know. It was a long time ago. Masada and I were both young at the same time. And, but we were talking about, at that point, 70% of violent attacks were between people who knew each other, either intimately or just tangentially as part of a crowd. And that's gone. Right now, the vast number of assaults are between strangers, which is 100% change in what it was when I took my first self-defense classes. The other thing is that it was almost always one or two aggressors. The single aggressor was the overwhelming threat if you go back 30 years, 40 years. Right now, multiple aggressors. Multiple aggressors is the standard now. And, if you have in your head, well, I know how to deal with a single aggressor. Well, great. Best of luck. Yeah. Joe Bob's friend is going to be there, and his friend. Right. So once again, it's erring on the side of caution. To me, is saying, I think there are multiple aggressors. I just don't see the others. So my movements have to be to get me clear of multiple aggressors, because, I know from Mark MacYoung's writing. I also know from my time in the martial arts, where when you had to fight multiple aggressors, you could only win if the game was loaded. If they said, okay, now you pause and let Joe lead the aggression, and then Sally aggresses, and then so, don't happen in the real world. Yeah.
No choreography like that.
Yeah, I've seen street fights, and it didn't look at all like West Side Story. And there's no singing either.
But there, what I'm seeing in you modeling, and I think that if I took one thing away from this, and I'd like the viewers to take away, is that there's that mental flexibility that you're demonstrating, because in many ways, it's easy for us to get stuck back in our salad days and saying, well, I know this because this is what worked for me and I was great at that point. Well, you know what? You've said over and over this morning, the landscape is entirely different. What is your recommendation for us, outside of the question I'm going to ask you in a few minutes, and that is how and where we access your programming? What is your recommendation for us as far as keeping that that mental fluidity, that awareness of what may come our way? What's your suggestion?
I think some of it is for us to be more humble. Is that one of the things that when I was climbing big mountains and I was training to climb McKinley, which is a dangerous mountain, and we saw people die on the slopes. It is a scary thing. Was that Steve Ilg, who was my personal trainer at the time and who worked with me for years, Steve said, "You ain't smarter than Mother Nature." He goes, "No matter what I teach you, Mother Nature can find stuff you've never seen before, and you need to be aware that Mother Nature can throw something at you that you don't have the index card for, and that means that you have to have, as he said, he goes, you have a plan A, you have plan B, C, D, Z, 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 Z. You always are thinking when you model, when you do this mental modeling, you always have to say, a chaotic situation can throw things at me that I would never have imagined. So there's 3 circles. There's what's likely to happen to you in the middle, and that's your primary training. And then there's stuff that could happen, and that's the second circle. And then out here, there's another circle, and that circle includes ninjas dropping from airplanes. That includes, alien invasion and James Tarr's zombies. But you still have to say, okay, that it's not likely to happen, but it could. And maybe I need to think about that. Maybe I need to, somewhere in that outer circle I need to spend more time working around a vehicle or something like that. But you have to have that open mind. I mean, and again, Dr. April hammered that, is you have to have an open mind. So when something does happen strange, you go like, okay, all right, step by step. How do I get out of this? What do I do here? And again, that is an humbling experience. You come out of the dojo with a black belt, or you come out with a USPSA Grand Master, or an IDPA whatever, and you think, damn, I'm a bad dog. Well, no, there are bad dogs out there that are really frightening. I spent some time with the FBI profiler that Joe Mantegna modeled his character in Criminal Minds on. And after, I knew the guy for a long time, and we got to dinner and stuff in L.A. and things. And I finally told him, I said, brother, I am so glad that what's in your head isn't in my head. 12 years crimes against children, 12 years as a modeler, as a profiler. And so, you talk to people like that, and you realize there's a whole level of scary shit out there that is beyond what you've ever thought about, Yeah. So you're humble, and at the same time as you have, I mean, it sounds so trite, you have to have your basics down. I have to know that I can hit the target. And I have to know exactly under what conditions I can hit the target, what distances I can hit the target, how fast can I fire the second shot that's going to hit the target. I have to know that on kind of a granular level. I don't need to find out, in a worst case scenario that I can't hit a headshot at 10 yards. Well, this is a bad time to find that out, So I think model everything. And I come back to a story I love to tell is back to the SAS guys, because SAS guys are cool. But I was eating at a McDonald's with like 2 SAS troopers, and a guy who went on to Homeland and spooky things, secret squirrel things. And we're sitting there, and the SAS guys, and I'm really new to this. USPSA had just started, and we just started, quote unquote, combat shooting. And the SAS guy looks at me, he puts his hand right on my hand. He goes, quick. Who do you kill first? He goes, the balloon's gone up. Here you are. who do you kill first? I'm like, excuse me? And he goes, who do you kill first in this room? And I'm like, I think that person. He goes, you're wrong. I said, what about that person? He goes, you're wrong. And the other troop, he picked it right up. And he goes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And he goes, let's talk about why we're talking about this. And they said, you talk about it because you need to start thinking on that kind of level. You need to start thinking, well, what happened if a balloon goes up? What's happened if there are a lot of bad people? This is like the McDonald's from hell or something, which is probably in Raton, New Mexico. But and the guy said at the end, he goes, you see why we're doing this? You see why we're doing it? And I said, I do. And he goes, after a while, it won't even seem weird to you. I said, well, that's a creepy thought in and of itself. But the modeling function needs to run constantly.
You go in
And even if
Walgreens, what do you imagine? Who do you see around you?
Who do you see around you? Does anybody look scary to you? I mean, and it's an interesting point here. Once again, change of landscape. Look at the number of aggressors who are in the, call it 11 to 14-year-old age. Especially when you see carjacking, entertainment carjacking, which we used to call joyride, right? But now, carjacking, well, why are you stealing this car? A normal business carjacker will say, because I got a contract, it's going to be disassembled and shipped to Matamoros tomorrow afternoon. Well, but, the other guy's like, well, it looked like cool. I like to drive this car. This be fun. Yeah. Okay. That's kind of scary. But these are young people. Young men and women who the scary thing to me is the 3 women who hijacked an Uber driver, and eventually it ended up in a car crash where the Uber driver was killed. I mean, this is a guy working a side job for extra money for his family, and one of the aggressors, she gets out and she's like, I don't know, 17, 18. She gets out of the car and she goes, "Damn, I lost my phone." That to me was very scary. It's like, he's dead. He's lying there. His head's cracked open like an egg. She's like, yeah, but damn, I lost my phone. Yeah. So you have to model that. And it doesn't have to get scary modeling. It just needs to run as a sub-program all the time. And you do have to, I believe, in a world that we're in now, we have to change our lives somewhat. It's like, well, when's the last time you went to the mall?
5 years ago.
Oh, about 2013. I don't eat in food courts. Food courts are bad. I don't do that. Those things are no longer a part of my life. I don't tend to go to things with large crowds of people. Well, I'm old, so all those young people frighten me just in general. But I don't want to do things around large crowds of people, things that I might have found super appealing when I was younger. It's more like, I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do it. I want to make those changes in my life. I mean, the big joke, as you know, is I live in a town that in the last census had a population of 0. I was actually thinking of running for mayor, but there's just so few opportunities for graft. I'd have to cheat myself. I mean, it just wouldn't work. Me and my beagle would vote me in.
That's right.
But I used to live in New York City.
Yes. Miami, Memphis.
I've lived in big places and I loved them. When I was there, I loved them. But I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't even go back to New York City unless there was a lot of money on the table. Because it's when you live in a big city like New York, you have to learn the city and learn what you can get away with. And I know exactly what I can get away with in 1978. Sadly, it is no longer 1978.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, and so there is that acknowledgement. I've oftentimes said that I was happy that I got my overseas travel. I was happy I got it when I was too dumb and stupid and young to know just the risks I was taking, because I would not do it again today.
Well, it's, I've traveled a lot in the third world back in the day. I've been in small wars. I've been in scary places. And I promised my sweetie that I was done with that. They're no longer going to be, scary places. And then I went to Jerusalem, and she goes, "You promised." So, well, I never thought of Jerusalem as a scary place. And she goes, "Geez, Michael." But you have to look at that. I mean, she would really love to go to the Louvre, in Paris. And the question is, can you go to Paris without getting caught in revolutionary violence? Fair question.
It is.
And she said, "I'd like to see the Louvre before they sack it and burn it."
She's right.
She is right. That's a correct statement,
Yeah, she's right.
But the places I've been in, like Central America and South America, it's like, I don't know.
Well, we talk about that awareness, but I think there's also something that you've hinted at here, and that's that acknowledgement. It's the acceptance. It's saying that is what we're actually seeing. I am going to modify what I do to accommodate it. Tough times.
I so believe in reality. I really believe in reality, and I think that's most people don't. When people talk about, and I actually once did a self-esteem magazine. I got hired under contract, and the publisher asked me. She said, "What do you know about the self-esteem industry?" And I had this vision of a whole assembly line with smiley faces, with the smile being put on the eyes and painted yellow and sent out. I said nothing until you said that, but I discovered that most people, people talk about wanting to live in the present, right?
Yes.
That's a goal. I want to live in the present. But living in the present demands stuff from you that like what we're talking about here. If I want to live in the present, I have to acknowledge that the universe can be a scary place. And I have to acknowledge that, not to go back to Cooper's, color codes, but I have to acknowledge that I can't walk around with my head in the phone all the time. Sooner or later, something's going to ding me from reality. And so I want to always say, am I looking at something real? And are the things that I do to protect myself consistent with that reality? And a lot of people don't. It's easy to, breathe your own air. It's easy to, you'll find yourself building a model in your head of reality and then running the model, as opposed to looking out your door like, what's going on out there? Wow, that doesn't look like what's in my head.
We're blinded by our biases. That's the scariest thing about trying to work this stuff out. What's real?
I was lucky enough to work with a guy named Joel Arthur Barker. And he wrote a book called The Business of Paradigms. And that book shook American business, because what it said is that at any given time, we have blinders. And those blinders shape what we see. The paradigms shape what we see. And from a business standpoint, he was saying, if you can't get beyond the blinders, you are now limited to what you can do in your own business, because you can't get clear of those blinders. And he gave me a test. I was really proud of this. Joel had this test that he gave people. And his test was that show you cards, rolling cards up, and you would tell them what they are. And the cards were the wrong color, some of them. So the ace of spades would be red. And he would roll that up. And, he would show cards and he'd show shapes and things like that. And your job was to identify what they were and to describe them exactly as they were. I scored 100% on that test. And he goes, "You saw the red spades?" I said, "Absolutely." And he goes, you saw the black hearts?" I said, "Absolutely." "You saw these shapes?" I said, "That's because in my worldview, I believe in reality. I will accept that most spades are black. However, that spade wasn't black." There's that test that he did, and I replicated it with the scuba class because I really wanted to see it happen, is that you take a Coca-Cola can, which is, what color is a Coca-Cola can, Gila?
Red.
Red. You take the Coca-Cola can and you drop down about 75 feet in the water, and you put it down. And then you send people down and you tell them, tell me what color the can is. And in my case with that class, 80% of the class said the can is red. I said, no, red light doesn't penetrate that deep. There is no red there. It's only white. The can is white. But we do, and it's a power. It's a, you know, and one of the things that Joel did and made Joel a multimillionaire, not me a multimillionaire. I've always managed to avoid that. So my sweetie said, "How could you have been such a huge success in the only part of television that doesn't allow you to buy your own island?" I don't know, sweetie, but I worked on it. But you know, it made him rich was by saying you got to understand the Coke can's white. You got to understand spades can be red, maybe yellow. And you got to see that. So you got to be able to get past what he called paradigm paralysis.
Yes.
But it was great working directly with the guy. As you know, I you know, somehow in my life I bump into people, you know, and they're interesting.
But the cool thing is that then you have continued what you learned from that fella and many others. And you've brought it out to the rest of us out. I'm never going to meet Joel, but you've exposed me to his thinking. People who are long gone now. You've carried forward some of William April's things. How touching is that? And so you've got a lot to teach us. You know, I used to say, where can we follow you? But that got kind of creepy after a while.
I'm going to be watching. I mean,
so my question is, where can we keep up with the material you're developing? Because I think it's important.
MichaelBain.tv. Everything is all there. You can find the podcast, MBTV on the radio. I've been doing that podcast for 20 years. That's a staggering amount of bullshit. I mean, it could reach to the moon, you know? Also, I do a weekly show, Triggered, and it's just a lot of new products, but a lot of like thinking. I also try to, and I'm going to be doing that a little bit this fall, I like to interview instructors. I like to interview trainers and then just put that up. So, you know, I'd like you to meet X. You know, I'd like you to meet Greg Ellifritz. I'd like you to meet fill in the blank. You, Gila Hayes. And we're able to put that up. And so people can sit there and watch it. If they, you know, not huge numbers do, but my joke is I have a tiny following on the internet. But the difference is I actually know what I'm talking about. Right? Maybe let me rephrase that. I try not to talk about things that I don't directly know. You know, in the classic gun review, a guy asked me recently, he goes, I saw 5 YouTube videos, and they all said that gun was crap. I said, so what? And he goes, you don't think it's crap? I said, I can only tell you about the 2 guns that I have here, and they aren't crap. He goes, well, so-and-so said, yeah, so you don't think that those people are important? I said, no, I think I don't care. There's a difference. They may be important. But, I mean, so much of what don't get me started, Gila. So much of what's on the internet is 5 best, 5 worst. 2 things I would never do again. 3 guns I would never own. 5 things get you killed in training. 7 concealed carry mistakes everyone makes. All that's bullshit. Yeah. That's all someone's opinion. And some people's opinions are really, you know, really, you know, Marty, you, Ken Campbell at Gunsight, Lou Gosnell, the late Ed Head. I mean, my mentor, Walt Roush. I mean, those guys' opinions were important to me because those guys were been there, done that. Yeah. And their opinions were based not in what they read or saw, but their opinions were developed over years in the real world. And we should have more of that.
Yeah. You carry that forward. Thank you for carrying it forward this morning, Michael, and working us in before your trip to beautiful Raton, New Mexico. I believe you're going to Whittington. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to Whittington. I'm doing a presentation tomorrow morning with Rob Pincus. It's possible there will be blows exchanged, but no. You know, Rob and I were actually friends before guns. When I was doing a lot of technical diving, cave diving, deep wrecks, breathing stuff that no sane person would breathe. Rob was doing similar stuff, and I ran into him at conventions. And so Rob and I have known each other for a long time, and we a lot of things we don't agree on, But I have discovered, amazingly enough, you can be friends with somebody with whom you don't necessarily agree.
Well, that's how you learn stuff. Well, give Rob my best.